I'm sorting out some more onions today because I want to get some growing so I can harvest a few around Christmas time. And the ones I'm growing are called Florence Long Red, and they're a mild, sweet onion. We've already grown some this year and they've been harvested, but I can show you what they look like when they're fully grown. That's them there, a long red onion. Quite a good size to be fair, and a bit of thickness to them as well. And from past experience, these were a lot easier to grow, to get a decent sized bulb, than red onion sets like Red Baron. They always seem to grow quite small bulbs and then just stop. Regardless of what weather's like this year, this seems to happen every single time with red onion sets. So for a change, we thought we'd try some of these, and they come out really well. And we only grew them in these little caravan wash bowls that we've drilled holes in bottom of. So only a small area, and we had loads growing like that, almost side by side, not quite. Although this time I've got something I'm going to do so I can ensure that this particular harvest is going to be as many onions in that little container as possible, and they're going to be shoulder to shoulder, but we'll get round to that. I'll put a load of seeds in this tray, and you can see that they've come on quite well now. They're at that stage that they call the crux stage. If you can see that, some of these onions look like a number 7. The tops are going over, and that's what they call the crux stage. And that's best time to prick them out, because they're an established little seedling, but they've only got a very thin root system. So when you prick these seedlings out, it's minimal disturbance to that plant. And that's what we're doing today. We're going to prick out the biggest ones out of there, and then we'll transfer them to one of these caravan wash bowls and get that growing process started all over again. And we'll be growing them in greenhouse as well, because we want to try and get these plants growing as fast as we can. The first thing we need to do is top up this container with compost and then give it a good soaking, so that once we put these little seedlings in, we can firm them in. They'll stay perfectly straight and they're already watered, so we don't have to splash all over the tops of those plants, because we are going to be putting them quite close together. I've also sieved that compost, but all the waste has gone into the bottom of this container. All that lumpy stuff gives that container better drainage when we get round to putting something in here, which will be quite soon. But for now, we're concentrating on those onions. So I'm going to fill this wash bowl up with this sieved compost. You don't have to sieve it if you don't want to. I just like to get the compost as fine as possible for when these seedlings go in. And I'm going to virtually fill this to the top. Just give it a bang down to settle that compost. We don't need to compress it down. So the good thing about these onions is, if you look on previous videos and you see how they actually grow, they grow above the compost. So they're not sat under the compost and needing to push out to bulb up. They grow upwards. So using this example once again, if I just pop that in there, that's basically how these onions grow. So the only thing that's below the surface of this compost is the roots, and that's why we're going to try and plant these a lot closer together, knowing that they don't need any space to bulb up. So I've settled that down, and then I'll just add a little bit more. We want to leave a gap between the compost and the top of this container, so that water doesn't just run off. And I'm just levelling that compost out, not pressing it down at all. I just like to start off with a nice level bed. Something else you don't have to do if you don't want to. It's just my way of doing things. Now I'm going to give it a really good watering. So I'll give that a really good watering, and I'll just give it a little bit, let it settle, give it a bit more. Then we know this compost has got a good amount of moisture in it. Now I've got to that stage where I'm going to mark out where I'm going to put these onions, just like we did those carrots, so we could make sure that everything was equally spaced. but I'm doing it different this time. I'm not using an old seed tray. So I'm going to take this onion we've already grown and I'm going to cut it at almost its widest part. Don't worry, we're not wasting that onion. Then I'm going to use that to make a template. So I'm just going to push it into this compost and make these indentations. And then we can grow these onions as close together as possible. And then I'm going to do the same again, but in between the other onions. And then we've just got one central bit left. So around 19 of those onions in that very small caravan wash bowl. Then I'm just going to take my pencil and make holes in the centre of that to get these seedlings in. And that's why I wet the compost to start with, because these holes stay where I put them. If it were dry compost, it'd just keep falling back in. And I'm only going down about that much. We don't need them too deep because they're very tiny seedlings. So all we need to do now is carefully take some of these onions out and transplant them. So just digging in and easing these up. And we've got a very small amount of root, and that black bit on the top, that's the seed. So then I can just drop it into these pre-made holes. So I'm just going to push that down a little bit deeper than it were, and then we can press that together and keep that plant upright. And we need to be getting out the biggest of these plants, because then we can let all the rest grow on and do it all over again and get even more onions on go. So I'll just feed that in, push it down a little bit, then firm it to keep that plant upright. And we'll just go around and do the same until we fill this container. Now I'm trying to be careful so I don't damage ones that we're not using at the moment. This one has got a really good root system, and if you look close up you can see the start of a little onion bulb just there. So we'll have to poke this one a little deeper just to secure it. So I'll finish off doing this and then I'll get back to you. Thank you very much to Serenity for making that donation. Those donations really help us out in making these videos 7 days a week. So very generous of you, Serenity, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. It didn't take as long as you think it might, but we've got that container all set up now and everything is equally spaced out. So now we're basically going to get the maximum amount of onions growing in this tiny little container. So we'll keep that in greenhouse and see how it gets on. And we've got loads left in this tray because we're multi-sowing all those seeds for that exact reason. We can just prick out what we need, let the rest grow on a bit bigger. So again, we'll leave these on side and we'll do a few more containers over the next week or so. So to me it makes perfect sense. If you're small space gardening or you've got to use really small containers, you need to maximise the amount that you can get from each container. And we know now that these aren't going to grow any wider than those circles that we created. That's the maximum size these onions got to. So when they grow, they should basically be shoulder to shoulder. And it does take a little bit longer than just digging them out and randomly popping them in. But if the harvest is bigger, it's got to be worth it. If you're interested in seeing what we're going to be doing over at weekend, please hit that subscribe button, press that notifications bell, and I'll see you then. Take care.